Welcome to the UK Pun Off. We've got Noel James here with us, just for a little chat, just about comedy, about puns and stuff like that. So how you doing, Noel? First and foremost.
I'm doing very well, thanks, Ian. I'm very conscious on these Zoom things that my big forehead is very prominent, and people might mistake me for Phil Collins, but I'm not Phil Collins. But I'm doing well, thanks. I've been going for walks and eating well, and can't complain really.
Yeah, just sort of like, I don't know, taking care of yourself as much as you can, type thing. Yeah. Well, that's the goal. Sometimes we all kind of slip off, but yeah, that's what we try to do anyway.
Yeah, it's not easy getting older as well. Fucking hell.
Oh, it's not.
Oh, sorry, I'm swore then.
You can fucking swear if you like, man. I'm not going to do the clicker anymore. Look at the clicker anymore. It's not a PG show. Just sort of
Tetley, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, bit of Tetley, yeah.
You've done that one loads of times with it. Right. The first thing about puns is you think you've done an original one, and then you realise after a while it's probably been done a dozen times.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because I mean, I wrote a joke. I'm going to teach someone how to make tea without swearing. Yeah. They're PG tips.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that sort of you praise yourself for because, this is a great little joke or whatever, and then you realise that it
is. And I think it's harder in some ways, and like I would say there's loosely two schools of verbal comedy. There's the joke, and then there's the observational. Obviously, it's not as simple as that, really, but loosely speaking. And I think the people within the observational camp might look down or might be jealous of the people in the joke camp, either because they think it's not proper comedy or because some people think, well, I wish I could do that. And in the same way, I think there's people who do jokes, and amongst them are people who write puns, who wish they could do observational humor.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're lucky, you can do a bit of both, you know. I've tried observational routines, which I've thought were funny, because the idea is you just say something that it's an everyday observation that people can relate to. When I try it, people don't laugh, you know, and I don't know what it is. It's almost as if you like to think you know the secret of being funny, but then you realize there's other things types of funniness, you just can't do it, you know.
It's just maybe about the delivery of it, or
but I think it could be the delivery. But just to go back to the idea of writing, the problem with writing jokes is then the main difficulty, I think, is to be completely original, to come up with something that, you know, you're 99.9% sure it's either totally original or it's an original twist on a gag. So especially in the case of puns, where you're talking about meanings on words and double meanings, it's very difficult. I think it is possible because that's what we're doing on the pun off. But I think it's very difficult to come up with something. I remember when I first wrote my first comedy set, I tried to do it all my own gags. I was going to say something then about anyway, there's a joke by Groucho Marx where he says, I used to have what's that disease where you can't sleep? Insomnia. But I slept it off. And there's gags like that go back to the 1930s and 1920s and earlier, and people are still coming up with these things today, thinking, I wrote that, and that's fair enough, you know. But I think that's the hard thing about writing jokes. Whereas observational stuff, it's easier to come up with something because in your everyday life you encounter things just around the house, and you think, wow, that could be funny, you know, and it's not been done before. But anyway,
and of course, it's like the topicality of it as well, because everyone is basically kind of doing social media routines and stuff like that now, whereas obviously 20 years ago,
the
concept wasn't even there.
The example I was trying to remember then was I once had a joke about going into the hospital because I had some mental health issues, and I went to see the psychotherapist, but I realized that I was in the wrong wing of the hospital, and it actually said psycho the rapist on the door. Now, I came up with that in the early 90s, and Jimmy Carr used the joke on the live circuit, and we discussed it, and I believed him when he said he didn't, he wrote it himself. Then he used it on his DVD, and it's funny, there was another female comedian, Brenda Gilhooly. She gave me £100 for the use of that joke on the circuit, and I thought, that's brilliant. And I'm the joke, I can now see what I couldn't see at the time. Psychotherapist, anybody who reads that word and analyzes it just a little bit can see psychotherapist. And then I think a few years ago I looked up online psychotherapist, and that joke came up from even like a couple of decades ago. Somebody had come up, and I thought, well, it just goes to show, I made £100 from nothing there. But that's
the thing about like kind of older jokes, because for one of the shows that I did, I sort of looked into how old and how much puns are kind of used, because they are sort of looked down on, like puns, or they're just dad jokes or just silly little things or whatever. But I mean, a lot of work does go into like writing a good one, and it's I mean, Shakespeare used like puns, like the ancient Egyptians, even like going back that far, used puns and hieroglyphics and things like that. So it's not even just like a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, it's been used as a sort of communication and as humor for hundreds and hundreds, and even in some cases thousands of years. So I think that when the same idea sort of comes up and it's kind of like reused or whatever, like for example, the psycho the rapist type one, and as you said, you could just sort of read that word, and depending what way your mind's working, you could actually see those three words jump out at you. So I mean, do you have like a kind of a specific writing technique when you're going about creating?
Well, first of all, in order to, when I think about that question, I think about what you just said about, I mean, to be completely honest and blunt, I do think a lot of puns, I do think a lot of them are corny, and I would try and avoid a lot of what I call corny puns in my comedy set. And I even try and avoid being called a punster, and I try and avoid the label pun. Although I have to accept, I do use puns because that's what wordplay is. I like the term wordplay. I like to take wordplay and play not just on single words, but like full phrases and entire sentences. And then it's not just wordplay, then it becomes playing with like metaphors. And like there's one of my jokes is I once made a cake in the shape of a boil. It was a boiled cake, but it was actually in the shape of a boil, a big boil. So I put some icing on it that looked like ointment for the boil. And then I put a cherry in the shape of a fly, and the fly in the ointment was the cherry on the cake. That's like, and what, but yeah, what you're right. A lot of comedians today, some comedians look down on puns, but even historically in comedy, I mean, you're right. Shakespeare used a lot of wordplay, but like Monty Python made a big thing of not using puns ever. And Ricky Gervais despises wordplay. But then if you look at Monty Python, and I'm a big Monty Python fan, there is a sketch where they say, nobody expects the Spanish. I didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. And then a character walks in and says, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Well, what is that if not playing? It's not playing on a word in a pun, strictly a pun sense, but it's playing on a verbal concept, and it's bringing it, taking it literally. And that's what a lot of, so like in my joke writing, I would say not all my jokes are puns or wordplay, but a lot of them are. And I think when you look at that type of humor, you're trying to, you're looking at different meanings and you're taking one of the meanings literally. So I'll come up with jokes, which could be puns or not, but I'll often come up with them from conversations with friends. If I go for a walk and somebody phones me and they'll say a phrase, like somebody might say, do you know that buzz you get? And that's the other thing. I think I'm slightly autistic or something, because apparently autistic people often hear these phrases and idioms and you know, just things that most people would say, like you like to keep the wolf from the door, you know, and I'll hear that and I'll go, wait a minute, did you just say that? Or, you know, that buzz you get. What? When you're picked up by a swarm of bees.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I had a job to keep the wolf from the door. Well, I was working in a silver bullet factory, you know, who's keeping the wolf from the door, you know. So you get these phrases and they immediately spark off ideas. And I've also always been influenced, I suppose, by films and horror films and sci-fi and the grotesque and, you know, Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected. That type of thing often comes into my jokes, which is perhaps why some people refer to my comedy as surreal comedy, because I like the grotesque, you know. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I'm just kind of thinking, what would you? You've talked about.
Well, I'm trying to think of a joke I came up with recently, because I just did a thing with you, the buzzwords, where we were doing 10-minute sets, and I was listening to the comedians. But even in the preamble before the show started, you had a clicker to count every time somebody said the word fuck, and then Kevin said it's a cricket clicker, and then somebody said it's what's used to count the runs, and instantly in my head I thought of diarrhea and runs, and how can you count the run? I don't count my runs. I just look at it as it flows away or something like that, you know. But I mean, if you come up with a single joke, but I try and come up with something that can tie into something else. So then you'll have not a story, but you'll have a couple of sentences, like to do the joke about going to the hairdressers and asking for a number 2, and I came out with a piece of shit on my head, and then I might throw in, oh dear. People don't even know that word because it's a posh word. Oh dear, it's a posh word for shit, right? So I say, oh dear, you know, and then I complained to the barber because I was undeterred, and you know, which I now know that the comedian Andy White does a song in his set where he does the same pun, undeterred, with he has a turd on his head. So. But I know when I came up with it, I'd not heard it before, you know. But so you know. But then you try and tie them in one after each other, so it's a bit more substantial than just one joke.
And just quick fire.
Yeah, it's quick fire, but it's a little. It's like a mini story. But then if I come up with what I regard as like when I've, you know, maybe once in a blue moon, I'll come up with a joke which I think is. You know, by my standard, I'd say it's excellent, and it's a standalone joke. So I would say, for me, I used to be in a band called One Armed Leopard. The drummer went deaf. You know, I think that's a joke, and I know some fans say they like that joke, and you know that actually. But then I follow up that joke with saying we did actually try to retrain him how to play the drums. With the aid of vibrations through the stage, and it was going well until one night there was an earthquake halfway through the show, and he took it as a cue for a drum solo. He's still there. See, now that's good that you laugh, because that's not wordplay. Then that next bit, And my girlfriend also laughed at that bit, which is why I kept that in, because you know I have more confidence when I do come up with a clever wordplay than a joke which is just describing a situation. But that one is, and I keep it in, and you know, it's a nice mixture then.
So are there any kind of jokes that you've come up with or written? Because you've just said you've had that kind of the moment. I think we've all been there where you've written something and you've thought, this will make me a millionaire, this joke. And when you've tried it out, nothing. It just completely falls flat. Any ones that are your personal favorites that you thought that's a really good joke, but it's just it doesn't work.
Well, there are a couple of those jokes. Yeah, I would say there's some jokes I like, which I know they just wouldn't be big laughs. So, for example, and I haven't worked out exactly how to say it, but there's one about I was in the park watching my nephew playing in the sandbox, and then I saw another kid pissing in the sandbox. So I took my nephew away, and he was complaining. He said, "Why are you taking me away from the sand?" I said, "Well, the tide's come in, you know." But I tell you a good example of what you just said. This is a joke that I really like, but I don't think people will laugh at it. Is my father was an incurable romantic. He fell in love with his life support machine. You know, that to me, that's a clever joke. I like it, but another joke would be, which I quite like, which is more accessible, is I used to run my own business as a food sampler. Unfortunately, the tax office closed me down because there's no accounting for taste. You know, that's clever. That's, you know, but that's kind of, people would get that more. It's difficult. You know, it's not easy being a comedian when you realize you can't just, you know, I try and write jokes that I personally find funny. I would never, well, that's why we all try and do our own stuff rather than use old jokes. But at the same time, you realize you've got to account, you know, the mentality of the audience, or what they're used to, or what their level of getting, you know, you've got to write it so that you can convey it, so that they get it, you know. I mean, having said that, I have thrown in a couple of old jokes. Like when I did that buzzwords with you just now, I threw in the joke about Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal the Cannibal. Well, a man's got to eat. Now, I heard that somewhere. I can't remember who told it. I thought that was quite good joke, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, so I know what you're talking about, sort of making like your set accessible to the audience.
Yeah.
So do you have sort of, I don't know if there's a different room that you've been booked for. You think, right, well, no one there is going to get ABC material. I need to do this sort of different set. Like maybe if you know it's going to be a rowdier crowd or a younger crowd or an older crowd, and sort of hen stag type crowds. So would you always go in with your set, or do you have sort of different ones that you say, right, I'm playing this room, I need to do this kind of material?
Well, I'm afraid to say, Iain, I'm fucked if the audience, and I have played really, really diverse crowds in all manner of venues. I would say the last really difficult audience I had was I did a cruise ship, and I've only ever done cruise ship twice. And well, I've done a series of gigs both times. And I found them, you know, because in comedy, there's this adage, you must never blame the audience. But gradually over the years, to be honest, I've come to realize that, you know, you can't put the blame on yourself all the time. I'm a bit like the Tim Vine approach of comedy. I doubt if Tim Vine has got an alternative set lined up. You know, I do know comedians, a guy called John Newton. He apparently will have an old style club comedy set if in the event the audience is me. What I do, rather than change the jokes, I'll change the energy. I mean, I can turn up at a workman's club in North England and I can gauge it say, especially if I'm on later in the show, which gives you a chance to see how the other acts are going down, and you contrast your style to their style, and it gives you a chance to the audience kind of are ready for you, even though they may not be your type of audience. But if you're chucked on first, there's all sorts of factors I think are crucial in comedy: the lighting, the sound, the way people are seated, all those things. I find I try and tinker with them. If I think it's going to be a difficult audience, those things can improve it. But if I'm not allowed to tinker with those things, then what I might try is just to chat at the beginning of the set, say hello to a few people in the front.
Yeah.
But no, it's really difficult if you've got, you know, like I did one for a Christmas show in a hotel with a lot of elderly people, and I wasn't told I shouldn't swear. And I you know, I'm not really a big swearer, but that was difficult because they just get offended, and also you get some audiences, they talk amongst themselves during your set, but they still want you to carry on, which is to me is not, they're not playing the game, because comedy is about listening and giving your attention. But there's some old school audiences, they want you to carry on going even though they're talking amongst themselves, and then if you get angry about that, they don't like you, you know. So I think basically I'm one of those comedians, as it says on my chortle review, you know, if they don't get me, but I would say I have learnt how to play the room over the years and how to appeal. I can tell, you know, if there's a difficult crowd, it's usually because of one element or even one person in the crowd. So you sort of single in on those people, or you hone in on something. Like, you know, I had one guy once, as soon as I went on stage in a gig in Peterborough, there was a bloke down the front, he started doing sheep noises because of my Welsh accent. But I knew that he was trying to get peer, you know, he was trying to get admiration of his mates around the table. And I could see his mates were listening to me in a way and laughing. So I just plowed on. So often I just plow on, carry on, and then I get people on my side. And at the end of the gig, this guy was left on his own. In fact, I could tell he was upset. He was kind of he had a chip on his shoulder about something, and he complained to me in the interval, right to my face, about one of my jokes. You know, of course, I didn't bring up the fact that he'd, you know, done sheep noises, which I hate. But you just have to go with these things. So the short answer is, if in the rare occasion I can't do anything to win the audience over, I'm fucked, basically. Yeah. That's it.
You just sort of need to do your time, and tomorrow's another big time.
I always try and do my time. Yeah, definitely.
So what would you say is your proudest moment in comedy?
That's a good question.
I guess what it might have been, but what is your personal proudest moment?
What's your guess then, Ian?
Well, there's a little ITV show that you appeared on and did not badly at.
Yeah, I would say I did think about this today, the answer to this, and I think I have done looking back, I've done a lot of shows but it's not like people say there's a buzz from doing comedy, but I think after you've done it a while, the buzz sort of sinks into your nervous system and you get used to doing comedy. In fact, it'll be weird after this pandemic to go back on stage, because it'll be more like what it's like to do it for the first time. And I think I've done a few gigs over the years anyway, where like I did a gig in the Grand Theatre in Swansea in 1999. It was the first time they'd done comedy. That was a good gig. It was a nice big, I like doing, when you do a plush theatre, you know, with proper red seats and boxes and things, and it feels like that's where comedy belongs, you know. But I would say that your guess is correct, because when I did the semi-final of Britain's Got Talent, it was completely live. So it was a make or break, you know, it was a do or die situation. And not only were there like 3,000 people in the theatre, and it was actually the Apollo Theatre. So I've actually been live at the Apollo without playing live at the Apollo. So fuck you, off the curb or whatever. Oops, sorry.
We'll edit that
anyway.
out. It's all right though.
Oh, good. Are you going to cut that out? I'll say it again. Fuck you. So anyway, so I've actually been live at the Apollo without actually playing live at the Apollo. And when I went out on stage to do that semi-final, I just really didn't know if I could do it. And it was just a case of, it wasn't like being nervous. It was just like, I couldn't even remember my material, but then I just told myself, you just can't worry about it. You just got to walk out there and do what you do normally. And it was almost as if I really was, I was making use of the 25 years of comedy that I performed and throwing it into that, basically a 4-minute set on a big stage with millions of people watching me live. And also it's like the vulnerability. It's not like, because I'm sure you've probably played a gig where there's TV cameras, and I find that's an advantage because usually the people in the room are in a good mood. The TV cameras make them want to laugh. But when you're on, generally, Britain's Got Talent can be quite, it can make you feel vulnerable because they show the little film of you, at home, and Simon Cowell is there and all that. So you don't know if they're going to trip you up or not. So the fact is, because it's live, the first round wasn't, but because the semi-final is round, once the camera starts rolling and you start performing, they've got to let you do it. And that's great. And I did it, and I managed to, instead of just standing still and being static, I grabbed the microphone and walked around. And I know that sounds like just an easy thing to do, but I'd never done Britain's Got Talent. I'd never been at the Apollo. I'd never been in front of millions of television viewers. So the fact that I did that, like I would in a comedy club, it was just made it more dynamic and more exciting, and it was more enjoyable for me as well. And I think it was and people in the audience, there was a few people clapping at some of the wordplay, and that was great. So I think I held it together, and I just felt that it was a good platform to show what I can do, and it's there on YouTube. So that was probably my proudest moment in comedy, I'd say.
Yeah, well, it was a great showing without a doubt. And I think it was quite important as well because I think at that time Britain's Got Talent had quite the reputation amongst the comedy community for basically shitting on comedians. But that's I think in some way, sort of you going on and sort of just doing what you do, especially with kind of like wordplay, one-liners, puns, all that sort of stuff. I think it maybe did shift the focus from what the producers were wanting out of the show to actually what comedians could actually give the show. So I think, you've certainly done a lot of work in sort of changing that kind of perception.
Oh, that's good. I hope so. There was a lot of comedians that year, and I think 3 or 4 got into the final. And I got the sneaking suspicion that they wanted a comedian to win it that year. And I think because of that, I don't know any of this. I'm just theorizing that they gave the comedians more fair play because of all the I think you're right. They edit the program, and they've done it since then. But they told me that year, and they've told other people that year, that they'd stopped they stopped framing people to look stupid, if you see what I mean. But I think that the fact is, Ant and Dec were there, and during performances, the camera often cuts to Ant and Dec. But that year, I think it was Ant wasn't available because he had problems in his personal problems. There was only one of them, and I think the whole atmosphere made it more. It was more like the comedy. It was great to see comedy on that program because it's such a difficult program because of all the like in the Opportunity Knocks days. You know, I'd have loved to have been on that, because you know, you just stand there and the camera's on you. Whereas in BGT, the camera is on you, but it's also on the judges. The judges are the stars. It's on Ant and Dec. There's all these distractions, and you get so annoyed, especially as a comedian, because you have to do the chat beforehand. Now, if you're a dancer or a singer or a large, big performer, once you've done the preamble chat with the judges, you transform straight away. But when you're a comedian, you're basically doing the preamble chat, and then they say, where you go, they say, okay, you can start. And you're just being the preamble chat still, because that's the style of comedy. And it's a really difficult one to, I was really worried about that when I did it. I mean, I had no way of knowing. I know since then, the year after, my mate, Steve Best, who does visual comedy, he went on it, and he did well. He told me he did well, and they cut a lot of his set out, and they put little piano music, like sad dramatic music, and they made it look like he died on stage, you know. Luckily they didn't put it on YouTube, because he insisted, you know, that's not happening. And but yeah, so it was a sort of obstacle course, really. But I appreciate what you said, though, about getting that type of humor out there.
Yeah, the more we can get it out, the merrier, I think, man. Well, listen, Noel James, thank you very much for coming on and chatting with us about comedy.
I thought you were going to ask me about my favourite jokes, Ian.
Right, let's get on then. What is your favourite jokes? What is your favourite joke that you've written?
Let me get my list out. Okay, no. Oh, by the way, the one joke that the people behind the scenes in Britain's Got Talent wanted me to cut out was, funny enough, they wouldn't let me do jokes about dyslexia or other jokes because of fear of complaints. Because if you have anything referring to illness, unless I had it myself, I wouldn't be able to. But the one joke I had the trouble with was a visual joke. And the joke was, it's my impression of a frog. So I get this, and I saw it. And it really stressed me out, because I'd already submitted the script and they knew it was in it, and I did the rehearsal, and then after rehearsal they said, oh, we're not sure about that, and they wouldn't tell me the reason why. They just said they said it didn't land. In other words, the joke doesn't work properly. And then I knew, because I do it in gigs up and down the country, I knew it would get a good reaction. And also it's like a kid's joke, so it adds to the family thing, you know. And then the floor manager told me in secret, without the director knowing, you know, he said, you should just do what you feel like doing, just go for it. And I did it, and it got a round of applause. But that was really stressful. But yeah, I know you want to get on, but I have thought about a few jokes, a couple of good jokes that I like. I think Tim Vine writes some great jokes, and one of my favorite Tim Vine jokes is, and I think I love this joke because it's so short, and I think it's really difficult to come up with a short joke that is really good. And his joke was, he said, exit signs, they're on the way out. Fantastic, brilliant joke. I also do like that classic joke, the one about when is a door not a door, when it's ajar. Now, it's so easy to take these jokes for granted, and you forget that somebody actually wrote that somewhere in some place. And I'd love to know who wrote that joke, because, you know, if you go back 100 years, jokes like that, they probably weren't even around, you know. So somewhere in the early 20th century, people started, and but one of my there is a no. I'm afraid I'm going to have to end on that one, because that's Sorry, man. I ruined this here. No, okay.
Not at all. Not at all. It's been really good talking to you, man. Get some really good kind of insight, and just what it is to be like Noel James, a comedian type thing. And I reckon we could talk for hours, but
yeah, we could, probably.
But the monthly show is only so long. But I mean, we can get back together and have another chat pretty soon.
Yeah, and make sure, everybody, to look out for my clip on YouTube, because I made it myself. This is my my clip on YouTube. Yeah, okay. That's one of my favorite jokes as well. I forgot. Yeah, no, Ian, it's been great talking to you. And, you know, I look forward to all the money coming in from this.
Oh yeah,
That's
there's not even a QR there's not even a QR code down at the bottom of the screen.
shit.
So
No.
we're fucked. But anyway, Noel James, thank you very much.
Iain MacDonald, cheers, pleasure. Thank you.